when Ram was a little short of 16 years old, a great sage called Vishwamitra came to Dashrath's court one day. Dashrath was delighted. He felt honored that the great sage had come to meet him, so he greeted him warmly. They exchanged pleasantries, and then Dashrath asked him, what can I do for you? He also said, please don't hesitate. I will do whatever you ask of me. So Vishwamitra told him that he was doing a yajna. And there were two Rakshasas, Marich and Subahu.
What is Rakshasa?
What is Rakshasa? Now, let me know if this works. Instead of telling you what it is, we will see what they are doing. Because again, if I use the word demon or something else, I think I would be incorrectly classifying it. Let's go along and let's see if it becomes clear based on what they are doing.
Sure.
Okay. Because we also have some stereotypes and misconceptions about Rakshasas, right? And instead of saying, no, that stereotype is wrong, let's actually hear how they are described. And it's great that we are reading this from, so we'll get snippets of what the Rakshasas are doing, etc. And we'll learn who they are.
I have to bring up the Japanese animated Ramayana, which is how my whole generation visualizes the Ramayana. And I think it was a fantastic retelling of the epic. I'm not 100% sure if they followed exactly what's written in the Valmiki Ramayana. I'm pretty sure they took their own creative liberties with it.
Yes.
But my entire generation of Indians has used that anime to understand and visualize the Ramayana. Therefore, Rakshasas in that anime are depicted as magical dark beings.
Yes, and if you ask a child to draw a Rakshas today, perhaps he will draw them as, some large, hideous-looking creature with horns or things like that. But, let's see how... so, something like that. They are creating disturbances. Vishwamitra says that two Rakshasas, Marich and Subahu, are creating disturbances in my yajna. And he says this is not a one-off incident. There are numerous incidents throughout society. And the kingpin behind this is one called Ravan. Vishwamitra tells Dashrath that if he does not take care of this right now, things will get worse. And he must resolve it now if he wishes the world to remain rooted in dharma. Once again, the word comes. If the world is to remain rooted in righteousness, you must sort this out right now. So he said, I want you to send your son Ram with me to fight and kill these two Rakshasas. Dashrath was taken aback. He said, my son is not even 16 years old. He's still a boy. Una shodasha varsho me Ramo. Me Ramah. Dashrath went through a few emotions. First he said, I cannot send my son with you. Then he said, I will come myself with my army and sort this matter out for you. But in the end, Dashrath said, I cannot help you in this regard. Vishwamitra was, extremely angry. But he was also disappointed with Dashrath. He said, Yadidam te kshamam rajant gamishyami yathagatam. I am recalling some of these texts. You may be able to, because you know Hindi, you may be able to, understand them. Yadi idam te kshamam. If this is your capability, right? Kshamata. If this is all that you are capable of, then I will go back just the way I had come. He said to Dashrath, be well. But he said, Mithya pratidnyaha kakutstha sukhi bhava sabandhavaha. He reminded Dashrath, so, oh great descendant of Kakutstha. So Kakutstha was another king in the Ikshvaku dynasty. He's reminding him, oh great descendant of Kakutstha. Oh great breaker of promises. May you be well. Sukhi bhava sabandhavaha. Surrounded by your friends and family. Vishwamitra knew that Dashrath was secure, but only for now. If he didn't sort this out, then surely, his people were doomed. Dashrath's Guru Vasishtha then stepped in. He told Dashrath, he reminded him that he had made a promise to Vishwamitra, that he would do whatever was asked of him. And he could not break the promise. This was not the way of the Ikshvaku kings. And he also told Dashrath that he said, I know Vishwamitra very well. he will not allow any harm to come to Ram. And also, there are many astras and shastras, weapon systems, that only he knows about. And if you send Ram with him, he will teach them. So there is much that Ram can learn if you send him with him. And so Dashrath finally agreed, and they sent not only Ram but also Lakshman together with Vishwamitra. So these boys are about class 10 students right now, sent off to fight 2 deadly Rakshasas. And the next few chapters of the Ramayana are about Sri Ram and Lakshman's journey with Vishwamitra. So they head off east out of Ayodhya towards Siddhashram, the ashram where this yajna is being done. Let me also give you a quick background for the political geography of that time. So Ayodhya was the capital of a janpad called Kosal. Janpad loosely translates to a kingdom. But I say loosely because the area of the janpad was about the size of a district. So you could ride across it on horseback in a day, right? But that was not the only area that Dashrath ruled over, because he also collected taxes from the other janpads, from the other kings. And so there were the different, agricultural lands had villages, and then in between the villages there was the urban center called the Nagar, and all of this agricultural land was one janpad. Okay, between the janpads were the vanas. Vana is grassland or forest, which were not ruled by any king, because it's land that you don't need to keep organized. You don't collect taxes from there. So it was not under the vanas were not under the domain of any king. And the ashrams were inside the vanas of the rishis. So the rishis were also not under any king. So when they stepped out of Kosal, they are going through these vanas, the forests and the grasslands. They're sleeping on the grass. Vishwamitra is teaching them mantras along the way. And then one day, after about 2 days of walking, they come to a forest which looks very dangerous. It's ominous. There are broken branches and creepers lying around, screeching birds in the air, insects buzzing around. And Ram asks Vishwamitra, which forest is this? And Vishwamitra says, this is the forest of Tataka. Let me tell you about her. Now, Tataka is a Rakshasi. Okay, I said, let's learn as we go along, right? We understand who these Rakshasas are. So let's understand from the backstory of Tataka. Vishwamitra says that Tataka was born to a very wealthy person in a very good family. She was a gem of a daughter, Kanya Ratnam. So not at all the Rakshas that you would typically draw, like we just said, large, hideous looking with horns. She was a beautiful girl, grew up in a good family. But over time, she became full of Rakshasness, Rakshasatvam. She became cruel. And so she became a Rakshasi, right? Now, some of the stereotypes which are broken by this story is whether it is, some people believe that the Rakshasas used to reside in Sri Lanka or South India. No, we are 2 days walking distance east of Ayodhya, right? So we are not in Sri Lanka. It's not a location. Rakshasas is not a locational issue. Also, it has nothing to do with race, because she was not born in a Rakshas family. She was born in a Yaksha family, actually, and she became a Rakshasi, right? So it also has nothing to do with race, but it does have something to do with cruelty, Rakshasness.
For better understanding,
Yeah.
I think that most people, when they're listening to an epic like this, they attach modern day human understanding to the narrative of these epics. So again, when you're growing up, you're told that Lanka, which is like the kingdom of Ravan, is Sri Lanka. And then you meet people like Yashodev Devdar and Nilesh Oku who say, I'm not so sure. Again, this will all come later on in the story. But my angle for interjecting here is that I think society in general was a mix and match of different kinds of human beings with a fair amount of higher/lower beings mixed in as well. I don't think that the earth at that point was simply occupied by human beings as the one sentient species, which I believe that we are now, at least in the public eye. I think there may be other higher and lower beings which are living away from civilization even today. But at this point in human history, perhaps the higher and lower beings were also around, maybe in the forests.
We will see what Maharishi Valmiki says about that, but you raise an interesting point, which is that we often apply modern templates to try and understand the past.
Yes.
And many times that fails in the Ramayana.
For me, growing up as a boy, the battles within the Ramayana and the Mahabharata were the highlights for me. It's almost like the action scenes of the movie.
Yes.
So I'd love to know a little bit more about the battles, sir. Especially again for the Western viewer, what they're visualizing is bows and arrows, swords, maces.
Yes.
But there's also an element of mysticism. Almost like, have you ever seen the anime Dragon Ball Z where they have beams
No.
that they shoot out of their hand? Honestly, I do visualize some aspect of beams and light-based bombs that are thrown around in the battles of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Again, I'm not trying to attach realism to this. I'm actually trying to understand it from a visualization perspective. So what is written about the battles?
Right.
And or the question could be, how is a warrior described in the Ramayana?
So, visually think of this as two types of weapon systems. One you hit with a hand directly, and one which you throw from a distance, right? So what you hit from a hand is a mace or a sword and those type of things. And then what you hit from a distance, apart from a spear, most of these weapon systems are fired off from the bow, right? So the bow and arrow is a basic ingredient in it, but that arrow was often not just a physical arrow. There were also descriptions of certain, you can think of it as chemical reactions, in that some of these weapon systems which were fired from the bows were hollow from inside with a fire inside. In the last discussion, we had talked about 2 entire chapters of lists of weapon systems, but we don't know how it works, right? And this is where the list comes. So Vishwamitra taught all of this to Ram and Lakshman. Visually, you can think of Tataka right now throwing things at them, rocks and things like that, tree trunks. There is not a description of her using weapons in this, although the Rakshasas also had all the weapon systems. And Ram and Lakshman are firing off their bows and arrows, and their arrows are not only arrows but other astras and shastras, weapon systems as well.
Okay.
So after the incident with Tataka, they headed further east, and then they came to the ashram where Maharishi Vishwamitra was doing his yagya. This was Siddhashram. After the Tataka one, this was a beautiful forest on a hill, deer playing around, a beautiful song of birds in the air, and so on. An air of sanctity and peace. But it was also an illusion, because the Rakshasas could attack any time. He was facing a problem, right? So once they reached there, Vishwamitra started his yagya. Ram and Lakshman stood on guard. And Anidrau Shadaho Ratram, for 6 days and 6 nights, without a break, without sleep, they remained on guard until finally the attack came. So Marich, Subahu, and some other Rakshasas attacked them from all sides. Ram and Lakshman were thoroughly outnumbered. But Vishwamitra had taught them some weapon systems, astras and shastras, just now, on the way. And of course, they were great archers. So they were able to fire off, although they were outnumbered, they were able to fire off these astras very rapidly in all directions. And they managed to kill all the attackers. All except one. So Marich was injured, but he managed to get away. And if you're broadly familiar with the story, he comes back to play a terrible role later on in the story as well. But for now, he manages to get away.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip from the Ranveer Show, we've uploaded a ton of other clips related to a ton of other topics. So explore the channel because there's something for everyone.